Welcome back everybody. Today we have a proposed minimum requirement for No Rest for the Wicked, a game that came out in early access April 18. I have quite a backlog of video about this game because I love that game quite a lot. A mismatch of Diablo and Souls-like. Upcoming video will be this one, the proposed minimum requirement. I also have the real minimum requirement. I also have the most popular GPU RTX 3060 video, and obviously if you post your PC spec in the comments, I will check out if I have the hardware to make a short and see if your hardware can play this game, and at what resolution and graphic settings. So let's start. The proposed minimum requirement is a i5 8400 or the Ryzen 5 2600, 16GB of memory, a GeForce GTX 970 or a Radeon RX Vega 56, 35GB of storage, and recommended SSD. I mean, you can probably play on a HDD. Welcome to Respawn PC. I'm done. Let's game on. So the hardware I'm going to use for this proposed minimum requirement would be the Ryzen 5 2600, the 16GB of memory, and the GTX 970. We're going to play at 1080p because we don't know which resolution this minimum requirement is, and we're aiming at least 30 FPS because this is not a super fast, high-paced game. Keep in mind, this gameplay is after patch 5, hotfix number 5. I'm going to go to the same guy to get killed multiple times at a different resolution and different graphical settings to see where you should stand with this proposed minimum requirement. So the guy we're going to battle is this guy with the big axe. I start up at 1080p at the best quality. It takes a couple of seconds at 26, 25 FPS to have all the assets load, but when it's load we have an average of 39, sometimes a bit higher, sometimes a bit lower. The GPU is maxed out 100%. The CPU have still have some headroom, and we're using 13.6GB of RAM. We can almost finish the video on this. It worked. Proposed minimum requirement, but we are at the best quality graphics settings. Maybe we can reach 60 FPS, maybe that was the target. Let's die and try other settings. So just changing the preset from best quality to balance, we get an average when every asset is loaded of 51 FPS. The GPU have a bit less of usage, averaging in the 85-87% of utilization, and not the all VRAM the GPU is using. CPU didn't change anything, and the RAM itself dropped to almost 12GB of RAM instead of almost 15. Let's die again and try something else. Setting the preset of graphic at performance, we didn't get much difference. We even have lower FPS, averaging 48. The GPU is doing 88% of utilization, 2.9 of VRAM. The CPU didn't change anything, and the RAM we're now at 10.5. And yeah, let's die and try something else. Now let's do 720p at best quality. This will give you an average of 49 FPS, and nicely visual is just a really low resolution. The GPU is maxed out on the VRAM. You're using all the 4GB, but using the power of only 78, 77. CPU is a bit more demanding, reaching mid 40 instead of mid 30. And the RAM, we are back at 13.2, 14GB. Still at 720p, dropping the graphical settings to quality instead of best quality, we get an average of 50-51 FPS. The RAM is a bit lower at 12.8, and the GPU is doing a bit less again. Same for the CPU, a bit less usage. At 720p, now at the balanced graphical settings, we get an average of 54-55 FPS. So we're getting close to the 60 FPS. GPU is doing even less, CPU is on 35% of usage, and we have 11 to 12GB of RAM. Let's die and try something else. Still at 720p, but now at performance graphical settings. We don't have any upgrade. We're still at 54 FPS when all the assets are loaded. So I guess so far, whatever resolution you choose, performance or balance, choose balance. Don't seem to have any gain in FPS by choosing performance. And by having the CPU and GPU not peg at 100%, we probably can play with less powerful hardware at that resolution. And here is a collection of me dying over and over and over, trying multiple graphical settings, playing with the scale, playing with the graphical quality, resolution, name it. I was never able to reach over 55 FPS. So I guess that the proposed minimum requirement is not to have 60 FPS. I guess you can do probably a stable 30, maybe a stable 45 FPS. And just for the fun of it, I decided to put 32GB of RAM into that setup to see how it fared, because it seems to be hungry for memory even after the patch. And running around gathering as much asset as possible and minion or monster to attack me. I was able to reach a 19GB of memory, but the game is still in early access, so there's still space to improvement. I hope so, because I love that game. It's like the ARPG I was waiting for years and I didn't know I wanted. So for the part of the proposed minimum requirement, what they propose, you can definitely play the game, and that on 1080p at the best quality you can possibly push the game. That is a really nice win, because there's a lot of people with old hardware that will be able to play this game. But it also means that the real minimum requirement can be way lower. You can play at balance with a lower GPU and a lower CPU. Memory, let's say that we keep that at 16GB. Anyway, next video will be the real minimum requirement to play No Rest for the Wicked. Thanks to have come watching, and see you in the next one.